Welcome to The State of Us.
Beyond mainstream cable news and party lines, with a millennial and a boomer, The State of Us pushes past the noise and uncovers all the issues that matter.
Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
The death of American politics. What is going on here? What are we talking about? Well, the thinking is, what's at the heart of the issues facing our nation? How have we become polarized? It's an ongoing theme that we've discussed at length, and we're looking forward to having a conversation today where we really dive into this issue of fundamental things that we're discussing, like free college in today's world, and how they all tie back to oversimplifying issues in American politics and the disservice that politicians do to us by telling us, well, we'll fix education or we'll fix wages. And they talk about them independently. Today, we're going to talk about how that is exactly what we don't need, how we have to be looking at things as holistic solutions. But of course, we couldn't begin a conversation on American politics without
True Chat senior historian and an educator of more than 30 years. Here is your friendly redneck liberal, Lance Jackson.
Well, if you're a longtime listener on this show, you know that we don't necessarily agree with either party at all times, that there are things that we would like to see done differently in the United States and by our government. We want to open our minds to you to try to open your minds to maybe a different way of looking at things. And while we think that a Biden presidency, we're ready to give it a try, I know there are certain things that Justin has some very strong feelings about as far as the direction that the country should go. So we're going to pontificate today. That is the word of the day. Pontificate, Pontificate, which according to Webster's is to speak or act in a pompous or dogmatic way. So we're not going to try to be pompous, but we are going to be dogmatic in that this is how we feel. This is what we think the government needs to do to correct some of the problems that we have from the previous administrations. And that's not an attack on Democrats or Republicans. It's an attack on the system, and that we need to find a way to do things on some of these issues and take a different approach than we've taken in the past.
You know, Lance, it was recently that we did the episode on, 10 key issues for Joe Biden and what they mean for you. And this kind of stems from that, right? Because in that episode, we talk about what Biden's plan for education is. And some of that involves higher education and this idea, right? We'll do some student loan forgiveness. We'll do some other things. And they feel like to me that they're sort of Band-Aid approaches. I would say we'll do exactly what you want, President Biden, right? All of this stuff that you talk about, loan forgiveness, et cetera, we'll do all of that if you can do two things for me. One, you cap those benefits at 10 years. In other words, 10 years from today, everything that you just put in place goes away. Because number two, the thing that you're going to do and you're going to give us is we're going to overhaul education, wages, and taxes simultaneously. Because that is the thing, Lance, that I think, as you and I have talked about, absolutely is killing American politics right now. It's this silo approach to, we got to fix student debt. Okay, but the way we fix student debt is not by wiping it out. Yes, that is an immediate term fix, but then the problem will just come back 5 years from now. We'll just have a bunch of kids again with more student debt and nothing will have been fixed. So the long-term solution, to your point, is one, fix the wage issue, which is not a blanket federal minimum wage. It's more complicated than that. It's got to be varied by region, by area to account for cost of living and not just be thrown out there as some random number, because it is unfair to large places and unfair to small places when you use an averaged minimum wage like that. So again, you got to make it variable. And then the tax thing is you fix all three at one time. You simplify taxes, you raise wages proportionally, and you overhaul education, which means two things, at least in my mind. We take a serious look at what we are opting to teach in your high school career and early childhood education as well. We take a serious look at that. We overhaul that, and we change the notion, right? Because we end the perpetuation of your only option to be successful is to go to college. yes, going to college is a good option, but it's a bad option if everybody does it. And that's part of why costs are skyrocketing and that college graduates aren't making the type of money they should make. The higher percentage of the population that goes to college, the less valuable college becomes. Yes, they're more educated, but they're making less money. So what good did your additional education get you if it doesn't separate you from the rest of the population? And it also is showing, because now we have a skyrocketing price for all of our contract type labor, right? I mean, you can't find a plumber or somebody to put up gutters reliably because there aren't any people doing these jobs. So now we have to pay through the nose to get them done. And in some places, you can't find anybody to do them because there just isn't anybody to do them. So we've just completely, I'm trying to think of an appropriate word. We've completely smashed the whole system. And in order to fix it, we can't do it in silos. We have to approach it as a comprehensive issue because they're all tied together. What you do to education affects wages, affects taxes. What you do to taxes affects the other two. And instead we act like they're each, this thing where we can just fix the symptoms and not the cause.
Well, I don't like the Democrats or the Republicans' solution to any of these problems.
Exactly.
The only reason I voted for Biden is because I'm sick and tired of watching Trump's attitude towards things divide the country even further. What I feel is dividing the country. I just don't like the attitude. Neither one of them are going to solve the problems. We're not going to be better off 4 years from now because the Democrats won the presidential election. Secondly, we've got to have a problem here because I came from nothing. I mean, neither one of my grandparents, just to show you how much, and I know to Devon, whether, you can even understand this, not that it's just mind boggling to me that my grandparents had a high school education. That was it. My parents scraped together money to go to college. We were dirt poor. I was dirt poor when I graduated. My dad took a job at a college so that I could get a couple years of education, but then he got sick. Then I could go to work, and my wife and I worked full time to get our undergraduate degree and our postgraduate degree. But the bottom line was when we got there, there was money available for us to the point where our kids could get scholarship money and then we could pay the rest of their colleges so they could graduate without the debt. But it only took look at what happened. My grandparents never even went to college, barely got a high school diploma. I think only 3 out of 4 had a high school diploma. Then both my parents found a way to go to school. My wife and I worked like you're working right now, Devon. I mean, I worked at an office supply store. You're working at Walmart, but that was enough to pay for me to go to college. And then we scrimped and saved and never bought new furniture and didn't have a nice big house or anything so that we could go get our master's because that paid more in our job. And so that's what's wrong, is why the system is not allowing for that kind of progression to be set up. And neither the Republicans nor the Democrats today are answering that or solving that problem. Neither one of them. There's no political group in the United States that's solving that problem. So I didn't vote for the Democrat this time because they have a better plan. Just because I just wanted to listen to somebody who could at least lie to me with a smile on their face and I might be able to believe it. It's just, sorry. We're all missing the point and things aren't going to get any better.
To your point though, Lance, part of what changed, right, is corporations paid their fair share back then. And there was incentive to invest in their people. There was incentive to get an education. The minimum wage was set against inflation. And right around the late 70s through the early 90s, all of that was upended. I mean, all of it changed.
Thank you, Ronald Reagan. Because the corporate tax rate was between 70 and 90%. And then, we can't do that. We're going to, the trickle down theory, we're going to let businesses make money and it'll trickle down to the masses. Well, it hasn't happened.
Definitely at its height through the Reagan era, but right, it's been perpetuated by presidents ever since.
Right. That's where it started. Yeah, we continued it. Yeah, you're right.
Exactly. I mean, we have to change that conversation. And it doesn't mean we necessarily have to go back to a 90% corporate tax rate, but we do have to ask ourselves, don't we want, if we have the choice between investing in ourselves or businesses investing in their workers, or paying the government, right? As a person, I can invest in myself or pay the government. Or as a business, I can invest in my people or pay the government. Which of those do we think is better? Well, the answer, if we're Americans, right, should be that if we are allowed to invest in ourselves, or as a company, if we're allowed to invest in our people, those things are going to return on investment much higher than giving the money to the government, because we don't live in a society where we're expecting the government to manage all of that. And that's the disconnect. The countries that do what we're doing are socialist nations where the government is expected to handle all of that. We don't expect the government to handle all of that. So we're in this weird limbo between a quasi free market, quasi socialist nation. And it's not a place. We used to have a balance that worked. The balance is broken, and we have to rebalance things, because right now we're giving too much to the government, and we're not allowing the government to manage that effectively. And so if we give less to the government, that's okay, but then we have to make it the smart thing to do the right thing with that money, which would be to reinvest in employees, to reinvest in the business, to reinvest in yourself with education. Those are the things that have to be done, because the problem is it's not one or the other. And that's the Democrat, right, and the Republican argument right now of, well, the answer is just give the government more money and then they'll take care of everything and things will be fine. Okay, well, if you don't want to be the leader in the world, we can do that. And if you want to lower the standard of living for everybody, then we can all have the same standard of living. So we can do that, but just understand that nobody in this country, except for the very poorest among us, will like that system, because it will mean for most of us a lower standard of living. On the flip side, if we do what the Republicans want and just say, well, just don't do any restrictions and give it all back to the companies, right? They'll do what's right. No, they won't, No, they won't. They'll do what makes them the most money in the shortest amount of time, because that's what they're designed to do. If you change the game and you make it about the long term, all of a sudden they're investing in retaining people, in training people, in helping people have good lives and be happy. Why? Because in the long term, those are the smart business decisions. Retain people, avoid turnover, make sure your people are happy, they're more productive, so on and so forth. But in the short term, those things don't make the biggest difference. And that's where I think, Lance, to answer your question, no, it's not a terribly simple answer, but right, that's what broke the system, is we unbalanced things, and then we expected that everything would just be fine. And now we've moved to, well, if you just give my party the power, we'll get it fixed. And that's the falsehood that people have to quit believing. One party will not fix it. The parties compromising and working together will rebalance the scales. We've been talking about the need for bipartisanship and the idea of approaching issues holistically. And this kind of all sparked, though, from that conversation of what Joe Biden wants to do with education and whether or not it's really a good approach. Is it holistic enough? Well, we're going to get the Devon Creature's reactions here to what we've discussed so far, as he is somebody that this matters a lot to, this component of education. In order to hear what he has to say, though, you'll have to keep it here, and we'll be right back.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
The death of American politics could be a result of approaching issues in silos and instead of holistically. That's what we've discussed so far, but Lance and I had a lot to say there. We got our pontificating in, and we are going to turn it over here for just a minute and hear, what do you think, Devon? Devon's our producer, for those that don't know, and also a member of the infamous Gen Z. And what do you make of what Lance and I have discussed so far?
I'm understanding what you guys are trying to get across and everything. It's just like, how long will it take to get to that bipartisanship that this country needs when we've already strayed so far away? I just don't know.
Immediately.
Yes.
It's simple. 3 people have to change their vote, and then bam, we're there. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Keep going.
So I don't really have any ideas personally on how we could do that. I don't even know how to. even help push that towards other people to get that change made and to make it seen as more beneficial. I mean, that's my question is, how do we get there and how long could it take? Because for me, time is a factor, because I don't want to wait in a country that is maybe going to make changes that I think would see beneficial, that would aid in keeping me to stay, but I don't want to wait forever.
Would you believe me if I told you it takes less than 30 people? It takes in the neighborhood of somewhere between 15 and 25 people. 2 senators, and depending on how the Senate shakes out, about 2 senators, 10 to 20 House of Representatives, and 1 president. That's what it takes. Everybody, oh, you can't, it's so complicated, so tough. No, not really.
You can get change quickly, Devon, if you want to leave the country, but you're not going to live in a democracy.
Oh no, I know that.
And that's my other, but that's the only response I have to you, that if you live in a democracy, it is going to take some time. Because you've grown up, in your 20 plus years, you've lived in an instantaneous, society. We have instant pudding. You have instant rice. You have instant, everything's instant.
I get you on the instantaneous thing. Maybe that does play a factor in me wanting a change sooner, which I guess me wanting this change has always been in the back of my mind for this country. And I just feel like we just go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and no progress is made and no more progress is made. And it's just this cycle.
I'm not blaming you for feeling that way. I was just trying to explain as a solution to maybe why you do. I get why you feel that way.
I wish I didn't have to feel, I wish I didn't feel that way. I wish I could be more passionate about this country and want to fight for it. I've never really felt that real sense of pride of being an American. Maybe that's a parenting fault, or maybe that's the country's fault.
I think it's a culture. I wouldn't blame parents. I think it's a culture.
It's a societal thing. I've talked about that a lot, some with family, but also with Brett, because I think he shares similar sentiments to you, Devon, of, there's not the attachment to the country, to the ideal of the country, because the ideal isn't working the way I feel like, beating the dead horse here, but it's the older, and this isn't blaming the older generations, but it's the older generations selling an idea about how it's supposed to be, because and they're not doing it out of malice. That's how it worked for them, right? They're not trying to lie. It's like, well, look, I did this, or I watched people my age do this and it worked for them. So if you do this, it'll work for you. And the problem is we're not recognizing on both sides that that's not true anymore for most people, And on the young side, just because it's not true doesn't mean that we can't fix it. But what's becoming is, we're seeing young people become more cynical because they just feel like they're continuing to be sold lies again and again and again. Also, the notion that we've, sold patriotism is never disparaging your country. And I liken it to the way that you deal with family. You can talk bad about your family, but nobody else talks bad about your family. You can be critical of your family. You can work to address the problems in your family, but you don't want other people to do that. And too often with our nation, we don't opt for that type of approach. It's, we can't be patriotic and say that there's problems with the country. So if you're patriotic, America's great. Nothing needs to change. We're just awesome. And that's no, and the flip side is, I can't be patriotic because our nation sucks and everything's terrible and every other nation on planet Earth pretty much has it better than we do, and I should just leave because then I'll have a good life.
I grew up in a time with the Vietnam War, and the chant from the right was, love it or leave it. If you don't love America, then just leave. And I was like, even as a young teenager and college student, I'm like, no. The whole point is I love this country and I want to make it better. Don't you see? I'm just pointing out the problems that are here and let's solve it, because I'm proud to be the American, but our country has a problem and we need to do something about the problem. I'm not putting our country down because I don't love this country. I'm putting it down because I do love this country and I want to make it better.
I would love for it to get better soon. And I would take the actions, and I already tried to take the actions to make the country better by voting and all this. But, you know, as we've discussed before, it's just like, it doesn't really feel like it matters so much with the Electoral College.
There's this picture of, we have all of this. And the point is, we have it better than other places.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Obviously we have it better than
okay,
some
Devon,
places.
where are you going? You know, and I say that, Devon, as a euphemism, you know, okay, people, you don't like what's here in the United States. Where are you going where it's better? Where are you going to go where you have more freedom than you have here? Where are you going to go that you have more control over your life than you have here? Where this may not be the best. It may not be the way you want it, but where are you going where you think you're going to get more of the things that you're searching for? And that's my old man comeback to, you know, I understand your complaints about this place. You tell me where there's a place that's going to give you more opportunity than we have here, and I'll follow you, because I'm looking forward to it. I don't see it.
The other issue is that as humans, we're naturally designed to take the path of least resistance. And I think part of how we've gotten to where we are is fighting that instinct of taking the path of least resistance. Because when we take the path of least resistance, we accept blind patriotism of, you know, well, the flag and standing for the national anthem and saying "In God We Trust," those are the things that really matter, you know. And it's like, no, those are not those are not America. They're part of how we express what we feel about the country, but those are not what we are. And on the flip side, you know, it's the, well, you know, if I don't like it, then the answer is to just leave, or, you know, I'm making a change. Are you doing? And not you, again, just euphemistically you, are you really doing everything that you can do? I guarantee you're not. I'm not. And I consciously work at questioning if I am doing enough to make a change in our society. And I don't think that I am, which is why, you know, you keep pushing. But I think too many people are content with, well, you know, I did my part, right? I said my little bit to my friends, and I voted. So, you know, I did my thing, right? That's great that you did that, because that's definitely the first step, but that's not the last step. There's 100 other things you can do to affect change and be part of the solution. If you can honestly look yourself, you know, in the face and say, "Yup, I have done everything I can do. There are no other options left for me to do." Okay, if you want to leave them, fine. You know, now you can give up. Now you can be done. But until you've done that, that's the whole, I guess we miss is, as a nation, most of us are not that way and never have been. But when we've made the most progress, we've had people who just refuse defeat. They refuse defeat. And we have a lot of presidents who, you know, strongly believed in something that they never lived to see, like Lincoln. I mean, you talk about it was, you know, I don't care what the Constitution says. I don't care what any of this is. I know what has to be done. I know what needs to happen for this nation. And I know enough that I got killed for it. And I never saw any of what I thought was important, you know, happen. Which is kind of the point, though, of how much do we believe in a cause? To what ends are we willing to go? Well, that's exactly what we're going to talk about coming up. Keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Willer.
How much would you sacrifice for a cause you believe in? How far would you go? Is it worth a life of never seeing the fruits of your toils? Or is it better to, you know, just move someplace else where you can get what you're after? Just go somewhere where those things already exist or are in a better position than they are here. And in defense of Devon, I've talked to several people my age, a number of people your age, who all the idea of going to Canada. I mean, Lance and I think even discussed it in 2016. You know, it's like, if this guy really wins, are we really staying here? And I mean, mostly not seriously, but I think there's real moments where that was entertained.
I hear you both on wanting that we should really try our hardest before just giving up. And, I think you're right. I personally try to do the things in my power, or rather, I guess not even that I really want to do. And I think that a lot of other people feel that way as well, that they don't want to go the extra mile because they feel like that they themselves cannot make a difference. Part of me also wants to, I say Canada, but really if there's a country that I could fall in love with, then I don't personally see any problem leaving America. And maybe I also use like, oh, well, there are these bad things and there's these beneficial things, and I'd rather just take these beneficial things and go to this country. I could say that. But for me, I plan on vacationing and doing some exploration before I finally decide on where I want to spend the rest of my life, because it's where I'm going to be the rest of my life. I feel like that's a very big decision.
And all I'm telling you is, quite honestly, I've done the same thing that you're doing, and I'm, 3 times older than you are. If you find that place that's better than here, let me know.
Oh, I'll be the first to call you.
I've asked the same questions you have for my first 40 years. And what I came up with is there's not a place better than here. Even with all of its flaws, this is the better place. Not to put anybody on the spot, but what created the United States of America? It's the Declaration of Independence. The only reason the United States exists as a country is a document called the Declaration of Independence, where we declared our independence from England and created these United States of America. With whom does the power of the United States lie? It is with the people. If we don't like the government, we can change the government. If we don't like the government, we can overthrow the government. Nothing happens to us unless we allow it to happen to us.
How do we use our power as the people to, per se, overthrow our government?
Did every American colonist agree with Thomas Jefferson?
No.
That's the other misnomer. Well, everybody was a patriot, so everybody stood up to the king and everybody got it done. It took everybody. No, they didn't. Your neighbor was out there ratting on you. Your neighbor was out there telling the king's governor what you were doing and having you thrown in jail and having your land taken away from you. So it takes people willing to sacrifice the ultimate sacrifice to make the change.
How would you personally take charge of overthrowing the government? What is a plan that you would have?
In the Declaration of Independence, it doesn't say how you do it. You just do it. So it's whatever you think is appropriate. It's whatever you have to do. And there have been people that have tried to overthrow the government who were killed, who lost their life, and they didn't change it. There have been other people who tried to change it, who were killed, who did end up, their push did change things.
So what you're saying is, even though we're passionate about our country and changing it, we can die by our country for trying to help it.
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Those are the people we study in the history books. There were a lot of people we don't study in the history books who did that, but we study the ones who put their life on the line to make the changes that they felt were necessary, who were successful. We don't study the ones who weren't successful. We don't study the ones like we don't, and now we say, and this is where getting a whole other argument, and I don't want to open at that, but we don't study the Confederate people because they had the wrong idea. Well, but they still had an idea. They were trying to change the country for the better as they saw it. So there's a part of me that respects them because they just didn't sit back and say, well, there's nothing I can do. They risked everything. They risked their entire way of life to stand up, but they lost. So we can't. And before we didn't just study them because they were the losers. Now we're saying we just want to erase them from history. Really? And I'm not saying that what they were fighting for was right. Don't get me wrong there. Don't go out and say, oh, Mr. Jackson thinks that, Confederacy should be praised. No, I'm saying, but they took Jefferson's, the power rests with the people idea to heart and fought for what they believed in. I think their belief was wrong, but I respect them for doing what the Constitution allowed them to do. So the way I've done it is to teach 35 years, 150 students, 100 students. So I come in contact with 3,500 people, 4,000 people through coaching. And I've tried to change them and send them out into the world and hopefully they'll change 300 people, and then they'll change 300 people. And so that's the way I've approached it to try to change our government. But now I'm to the point like, okay, I've been successful monetary. Anybody would look at it from what I started with, I've been successful. So how much of this do I give to Justin and the youth center? Is that where I make my change? Do I make my change spending how many ever days I have left and all the stuff I have in my house? Do I just give it passionately to, become Mother Teresa and just live on a street corner and hoping people will take care of me and give everything I have to the youth center to try to make a difference in this town? And then what happens if that one person goes on and discovers this or finds a way to get rid of global warming and pushes the oceans back and the ice caps come? What if that one person comes from the youth center? I mean, do I give of my time? Do I give of myself? Do I start signing my paycheck over to the youth center? Do I live a life of poverty to take everything that I make and give it to the youth center to help the youth of tomorrow in this small town? See, there's all different levels of how much are you willing to give? You know what I'm saying? And that's where it's like, I mean, you put the question to me, and you're right. It's one I'm struggling with this very day, is how much of what I have do I give back to my community, and my community, i.e. being my country.
Some of the people that, and I've told Lance this, he gives me a hard time for why do I like John Adams, right? Because most people don't. I mean, if you just said John Adams, you went out and said, who is John Adams? Most people probably couldn't tell you who he is. You might get some people that would say, I think he was maybe one of the founding fathers. Is that, didn't he have something to do with that? Maybe, that's what they would come away with. When you study his life, not his presidency, everything leading up to his presidency, right? You would be hard pressed to name a single figure that gave as much as he gave. I mean, he, sacrificed, it was before everything, family, everything, and he was against it at first, just for what it's worth. And I think that's part of why it's such to me, his story is inspiring. I don't think he was, and he'd be the first person to tell you he was a terrible man. You know what I mean? He thought he often criticized himself heavily, and chastised himself because he constantly was upset with his own shortcomings that didn't let him get done what he thought was so important. But he went from, doing what he always thought was right. And the way that he got his name was, the Boston Massacre, right? He was the guy that got the British officers who shot into the crowd off. He's the one.
He defended the British soldiers who killed the colonists.
Because he looked at the facts. And we all remember the Boston Massacre as this, terrible atrocity by the British. And, how could they do this? And when you really look at what happened, it starts to become a lot more murky of, they probably weren't in the wrong, because, and that's what John Adams did. He looked at the case and he said, I believe you all. I believe you that you did not give the order to fire, that somebody from behind your men was shouting that you were being attacked, and that should you have fired, no, you should not have, but you were provoked to do so. And under the law that we have in the land at this time, these men are not guilty, and it is wrong to convict them, given the circumstances that led to their, and that man is the man that, ultimately was instrumental in the Declaration of Independence, was spent, over a year in France to get our alliance with them, which without it, definitely, we almost certainly would have lost the war. Became the first person after we were successfully our own nation to go over and meet the King of England, to be our first minister to England. There was a lot of accounts of that encounter because we don't really know how it went, but how nervous he was, just because, there was a decent chance, and he knew this going over, that he would show up in the throne room and the king would just behead him, just as to send a signal to the colonies that, this isn't over. You think you've won, and I don't look at it that way at all. So, time and time again, all things for which he almost never received, recognition. And as president, did he do some things like the Sedition Act that, we would all probably agree are bad? Yes. did he also keep us out of a war that most of the nation wanted us to enter that almost certainly would have bankrupted us and probably caused our collapse with our second president? Yeah, he also did that. And it cost him re-election. He had advisors that came to him and said, if you go to war, you will be the president again. You know, no questions asked. And he said, but that's not why I'm here. You know, I'm here to do what I think is the right thing. And the right thing is to not go to war. The people want war, but I'm here to do what's right. You know, not just whatever they want. They opted for me to make the decisions. But it's the same reason that arguably his biggest enemy and also perhaps his closest friend, Thomas Jefferson, is the one that we remember. You know, he's the one that gets the memorial in D.C., not John Adams. George Washington's the one that gets the memorial in D.C. And not that those men don't deserve it, because they probably do, but John Adams probably deserves it every bit as much, and arguably in many ways affected as much, if not more, change. But we don't remember him. You know, so why are we doing it? And do we do it to be remembered, or we do it because it's right? You know, because if you want to do the things to be remembered, you run for president. If you want to do the things that affect change, you spend your life as a school teacher, you run for local office, etc. And those are not defenses of Lance and I, but that's the rationale of, you know, why are we spending time doing these things instead of those things? It's not that you can't. I mean, we've had presidents that have made some real change, but when you look at some of the biggest changes that went all the way up to the federal government, it's a municipality or a state that tried it first. And then it just, you know, grew from there. Out of many, one, e pluribus unum, our supposed motto as a country. And not just because people think about it in the sense of, you know, people. Out of many people, one nation.
You know, we've all pontificated and given our viewpoints, but we've tried to do it in a manner that accomplishes the mission statement here at True Chat, which is to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations. And we hope we've done that today, that we've educated you and we've been honest and respectful and open in our talk. And if you liked it, thank you very much. Appreciate you listening. And if you think it's something that everybody else ought to hear, which we do, let them know. Let your friends know. Let your families know. Every once in a while, I even say, you know, let your enemies know, because the way we can all come together and make this country better is by having these honest, open, and respectful conversations. And if they say, well, how do you find these guys? And, you know, how do I listen to them? Tell them we're on Spotify, Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcast, and everywhere podcasts are found.
The State of Us is released as a podcast Tuesdays and Thursdays by 4 a.m. in the Eastern Time Zone. We're also a syndicated radio program, so be sure to check your local talk market, see if they have The State of Us. If they don't, call them up. Tell them they should. For The State of Us on True Chat in Urbana, Ohio, I'm Justin T. Weller.
I'm Lance Jackson.
Special thanks to our recording producer, Devon McCain, for his participation today and his hard work making sure that we get recorded and sound good. And thank you to our editing producer, Bradley Butch, getting this all put together and making us sound like we know what we're doing. Thank you to our audience for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change. Be sure to check out our website, thestateofus.org, for books, articles, and all the ways to tune in. thestateofus.org.